Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to perform a completely factual structural autopsy of a marriage's collapse, exactly as it's depicted in the short story, The Blueprint of an Empty House. We're going to look strictly at the verifiable text, examining the evidence step by step to understand exactly how a seemingly perfect structure can completely fall apart from the inside out. Let's just jump right in with this absolutely incredible opening hook. This single line from Clara perfectly establishes this central architectural metaphor that we're going to be dissecting today. You see, she views her 7-year marriage not as a home, but as an airtight cage. And that raises an immediate glaring question, doesn't it? How did a masterwork of a life designed with such absolute precision end up suffocating the very person it was built for? All right, part one, the perfect facade, establishing Julian's worldview. So to really grasp this collapse, we first have to get inside the architect's head, Julian Vance. To Julian, life is bedrock. He is a man who literally lives by measurements, and he firmly believes that if you use the correct materials and you strictly adhere to the blueprints, the structure, which in this case is his life and his marriage, absolutely has to hold. He viewed the entire world as a definitive equation that was just waiting to be balanced. But here is where things get really fascinating and, frankly, a bit heartbreaking. Notice the stark, factual contrast between how Julian viewed their routine and how Clara experienced it long before the collapse ever happened. Julian looked at their 7-year marriage and saw a masterwork of precise measurements and rock-solid stability. But for Clara, the text reveals she felt this was merely a mechanical choreography of affection. They were occupying the exact same physical space, but they were living in completely different realities. Moving on to part two, the failure point, discovering the anomaly. This facade doesn't crack with some massive, dramatic earthquake. No, it's a series of microscopic digital anomalies. Let's trace the exact timeline of the structural failure here, because it happens incredibly fast. We start at 11:34 p.m. Julian is calculating in bed, masking his anxiety behind a lie about a work project. By 11:47 p.m., he intercepts a notification on Clara's phone. By 12:04 a.m., Clara literally walks out the door. And by 3 a.m., Julian is left entirely alone to begin a post-mortem of his life. We are watching a total demolition happen in just a matter of hours. The primary catalyst for this rapid collapse occurs right at 11:47 p.m. This is the exact notification that flashes across Clara's immaculate phone screen. The text describes this simple little identifier as an icon that drops Julian's stomach into a bottomless void and instantly initiates the collapse of his reality. While Clara is physically asleep in the bed right behind him, someone else is waiting for her tonight. When we look objectively at this encrypted chat history that Julian uncovers, we see exactly what the text describes as an architectural drawing of a meticulous betrayal. The phantom sender asks if she's safe. Clara replies that Julian is easy to steer because he never looks past his blueprints. The room is booked for 12:30. Every single verifiable detail has been engineered right under Julian's nose. Which brings us to part three, structural collapse, the confrontation. When Julian finally confronts Clara by the window, we are watching the total, real-time collapse of those competing realities we talked about earlier. Julian desperately wants to identify the failure point and adjust their schedule, but Clara just stops him cold. She tells him that he's trying to retrofit a soul into a building designed to be empty. She makes it perfectly clear that their marriage isn't some bridge that just needs more steel cables. The very ground beneath them has permanently changed. And how does Julian react? Well, he treats the shifting structure by applying aggressive counterpressure exactly like he would on a construction site. He relies on pure logic first, trying to identify the failure point and offering to adjust schedules. When that doesn't work, he actually resorts to leveraging assets and liabilities, threatening to strip her name from their accounts to force stability. He's literally trying to solve a human crisis with a structural equation. But equations do not work here. Clara's final words before stepping into that idling black sedan are both a sharp dismissal and a diagnosis. Fix your foundation. She leaves Julian standing in a stunning, award-winning architectural masterpiece that has suddenly and irreversibly become a tomb. Let's look at part four, the forensic echo, 3 a.m. autopsy. So it's 3 a.m. Julian is sitting totally alone in the dark on his low-profile leather sofa, and his analytical engine just turns inward. He faces this horrifying realization related to the engineering concept of liquefaction. That's when solid ground suddenly loses strength and behaves like a liquid. Julian realizes that sometimes a structure doesn't fall because of a massive outside earthquake, sometimes it simply implodes from the sheer weight of its own internal emptiness. Searching for verifiable, factual answers, Julian actually pulls out his physical blueprints of the house. Reviewing these vellum floor plans, he objectively notes that he engineered the space flawlessly for acoustics and thermal efficiency. However, he completely engineered out all the unpredictable volatility required for actual human connection. He didn't leave any room for expansion, for drift, or for life to simply happen. He realizes a devastating truth right here. He spent his entire career and his entire marriage fighting invisible forces just to maintain a perfect stillness. But stillness is not life. Stillness, as he discovers, is really just a prolonged state of resistance before an eventual fracture. Life, on the other hand, is organic. It chefs, and it absolutely requires the freedom to bend. Let's move to part 5, the residual analysis 3 weeks later. Okay, fast forward 3 weeks, the physical structure of the house hasn't changed a bit, but the settlement period is profound. The number 0 is so powerful here. It represents exactly what Clara asked for in the divorce petition that Julian receives. 0 houses, 0 shares in his firm, and 0 spousal support. She demands only her personal effects and a clean break, taking absolutely nothing from the meticulously calculated life she built for her. Attached to those cold legal documents is a handwritten note. Clara's words confirm something really important. She never hated him. Instead, she simply suffocated under his need for her to be a permanent, unchanging fixture. She literally felt like an architectural feature, a load-bearing column that he placed perfectly, but never actually looked at. Finally, part 6. Fixing the foundation. The realization. In the aftermath of all this, Julian finally grasps the fundamental error in his life's equation. He's standing there, looking down at the steel rock bolts anchoring his cantilevered concrete deck to the hillside, and he gets it. He admits that by treating love as a load-bearing static object, he actually forced it to break. He tried to bolt Clara down into a granite foundation so securely that she could never be lost, totally failing to realize that love isn't made of concrete or tempered glass. And for the first time in 7 years, Julian actually discards his master plan. We can verify this massive shift through his final actions. He doesn't fight the divorce. He emails his firm to take an extended leave, significantly reordering his current Hudson project to include more air and light. And finally, he puts on his jacket and steps out of the house into the unknown, completely without a blueprint. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought about the chaotic, beautiful volatility of relationships. Can you really engineer a master plan for human emotion? Julian Vance learned the hard way that you simply cannot calculate a human soul. The question for all of us is, where in our own lives are we trying to rigidly engineer something that simply needs the freedom to breathe? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating architectural autopsy with me. Catch you next time.